If you're growing food at home, you're probably making a calculation most gardeners never actually do. What is this costing me per square foot? And what would I pay for this at the grocery store? The answer is humbling. Some crops return 8 to 12 times what you'd pay retail. Others barely break even. Most home gardeners have no idea which is which, so they end up spending more on seeds, soil, and time than they would have spent just buying produce. This isn't complicated math. It's not about exotic varieties or advanced techniques. It's about understanding which plants pack the most value into the smallest space. And once you know which ones do, your entire approach to home food production changes. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 7 crops deliver the best return on space, why they're so efficient, and how to structure a small growing area around them instead of just planting randomly and hoping something pays off. This channel focuses on the practical economics of food production, what actually works, what the data shows, and how to make decisions based on reality rather than assumptions or trends. We don't chase every gardening fad. We follow the numbers. If a crop doesn't deliver value for the space and effort, we're honest about that. If something works at scale, we show you why and how to apply it to your situation. If that approach interests you, subscribe. We publish research-based content on growing food, understanding yield, and making intentional choices about what you produce. Here are the 7 crops that consistently deliver the highest financial return per square foot of growing space. Microgreens, lettuce and leafy greens, herbs, hot peppers, cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, and pole beans. This isn't a ranked list by one standard. Yield varies by climate, variety, and season. But these 7 categories appear in virtually every serious analysis of crop efficiency because they share something in common. High market value relative to the space they occupy and the time they need to mature. Nutritional and economic value microgreens. The densest return microgreens are seeds harvested at 7 to 14 days before the first true leaves emerge. A single tray measuring roughly 10 by 20 inches produces approximately 1 to 1.5 pounds of microgreens. At retail, microgreens sell for $8 to $15 per pound, sometimes higher for specialty varieties. That means a single tray generates $8 to $22 in retail value for less than 1.4 square feet. The cost of production is minimal. Seeds cost a few cents, growing medium is inexpensive, and you need only water and indirect light. Growing space can be a shelf, windowsill, or basement corner. You can produce successive trays continuously, cycling new ones every few days, which means a single small space can generate dozens of harvests per year. Even accounting for seed, medium, and labor, your profit margin is typically 60 to 80%. Lettuce and leafy greens. Volume and speed, lettuce matures in 30 to 60 days, depending on variety and conditions. A standard 4 by 8 foot bed can produce 40 to 60 heads of quality lettuce, or 4 to 6 pounds per 10-foot interval. At grocery store prices, $3 to $5 per head. That's $120 to $300 per bed per season. The efficiency comes from density. You can plant lettuce closely, about 6 to 9 inches apart, depending on the variety. Loose leaf varieties allow you to harvest outer leaves continuously, extending productivity from a single planting. Water and fertilizer needs are moderate. Pest pressure is manageable without chemicals in most seasons. In a climate with multiple growing seasons, a single bed can produce 4 to 5 crops per year, meaning annual returns of $500 to $1,500 per 32 square feet, or roughly $16 to $47 per square foot annually. Herbs. Year-round demand common culinary herbs. Basil, parsley, cilantro, chives, thyme, oregano occupy minimal space and command disproportionately high prices at farmers markets and retail outlets. Fresh basil costs $8 to $12 per pound. Cilantro and parsley fetch $5 to $8 per bunch. Even dried herbs sell for $10 to $20 per ounce. A single basil plant in a small pot produces weekly harvests for 4 to 6 months. 3 or 4 pots together create a supply that would cost $100 to $150 if purchased fresh at a grocery store or farmer's market over a season. The space requirement is minimal, a small shelf or raised bed corner. Herbs are also among the easiest crops to grow. They tolerate variable conditions, recover quickly from harvesting, and have minimal pest or disease issues in most settings. Once established, they nearly pay for themselves in a few weeks. Hot peppers. Extended harvest. High value, a single hot pepper plant produces dozens to hundreds of peppers depending on variety and growing conditions. At retail, fresh hot peppers cost $2 to $4 per pepper. Specialty heirloom varieties fetch more. A productive plant generates 50 to 150 peppers over a season, worth $100 to $600. The advantage is longevity. Pepper plants produce from midsummer through frost, and in warm climates, they can be overwintered and regrow the following year. A single square foot of space holding 2 or 3 mature plants can generate $300 to $500 in retail value annually. Peppers also store well. You can dry them, pickle them, or ferment them, which extends their usable window and allows you to monetize or utilize harvests over months rather than weeks. Cherry tomatoes. Productivity oversized cherry tomatoes produce more fruit per plant than large slicing varieties, often 200 to 400 fruits per season. At 50 cents to $2 per fruit at farmers markets, a single productive plant generates $100 to $800 in retail value. Even at conservative estimates, a single plant pays for itself many times over. The catch is that tomatoes require space, support structures, and consistent care. A single plant needs at least 2 to 3 square feet when you account for the footprint and vining structure. But on a per-fruit basis, the value is significant. Determinants, bush varieties, mature faster and concentrate their harvest, making them efficient for processing or preservation. Indeterminates, vining types, produce continuously but require more infrastructure and space management. Cucumbers. Space efficiency through structure. Cucumbers are typically grown vertically on trellises, which means it can occupy a small footprint while directing vines upward. A single plant trained on a 6-foot trellis might occupy only 1 to 2 square feet of ground space while producing 15 to 40 cucumbers, depending on variety and conditions. Cucumbers command $1 to $3 per pound retail, and a single plant produces 5 to 15 pounds. The math is straightforward. 1 plant, 1 square foot, $5 to $45 in retail value. The efficiency increases if you stack multiple plants on the same trellis or succession plant throughout the season, ensuring continuous production rather than a single concentrated harvest. Pole beans. Nitrogen-fixing and yield pole beans are legumes, meaning they fix atmospheric nitrogen, reducing your fertilizer needs while improving soil health. They produce prolifically when grown vertically on supports. A 6-foot trellis planted with pole beans yields 5 to 8 pounds of beans, worth roughly $10 to $24 at retail rates. The advantage extends beyond the harvest. Because they fix nitrogen, they reduce fertilizer costs in subsequent seasons. They mature quickly, 60 to 70 days, allowing multiple plantings in a single growing season. They also improve soil rather than depleting it, which reduces amendment costs over time. If these crops deliver such clear financial returns, 8 to 12 times more value than their cost, why doesn't every home garden focus exclusively on them? The answer isn't suppression or conspiracy. It's practical constraints that are worth understanding. Preference and taste matter more than efficiency. Most home gardeners grow what they want to eat, not what maximizes profit. They plant heirloom tomatoes because they taste better, or unusual squash varieties because they're curious. That's legitimate. Food is personal. Infrastructure requirements vary. Microgreens require trays and consistent moisture. Cucumbers and pole beans need structural support. Peppers demand warmth and light. Not every gardener has those conditions, so they plant what works with their actual setup. Market access determines real value. A home gardener might grow $50 worth of microgreens that they eat or give away, which is valuable to them. but selling that microgreens would require licensing, food safety certification, and market access. The retail price of $15 per pound only applies if you're actually selling at that price. If you're consuming it, the value is what it would have cost you to buy. Time and attention have different values for different people. Some growers don't mind maintaining 4 successive herb plantings. Others prefer to plant lettuce once and let it mature. Efficiency matters only insofar as it aligns with your actual goals and capacity. Climate and seasonality create bottlenecks. A crop that yields beautifully in June might be impossible to maintain in August heat, or it might require expensive season extension in winter. Real yields depend on where you are. This information isn't new. Agricultural Extension Services have published yield data for decades. The USDA tracks which vegetables return the most value per acre. Market gardeners operating at commercial scale have optimized these same 7 crop categories because the economics simply work. What has changed is accessibility. 50 years ago, this data existed primarily in printed extension bulletins or specialized farming publications. You had to actively seek it out. Today, it's available immediately but scattered across gardening blogs, social media, and contradictory sources where emotion often drowns out numbers. The reason these 7 crops keep appearing in efficiency analyses isn't that they were discovered recently. It's that they've consistently performed well across different regions, seasons, and growing methods because the underlying biology is reliable. Lettuce matures in roughly the same time frame, whether you're in California or New England. Basil responds predictably to warmth and light. Peppers produce at consistent rates when conditions are met. The economics follow from that biological predictability. Multiple studies on small-scale food production confirm these patterns. A University of Vermont study on vegetable returns found that high-value crops like herbs, lettuce, and specialty peppers return $10 to $50 per square foot annually, while low-value crops like storage potatoes return $2 to $5 per square foot. Microgreens research, compiled across several agricultural universities, consistently shows returns of $100 to $400 per square foot annually, by far the highest of any edible crop. A study on urban agriculture in Toronto found that the highest value production came from herbs, leafy greens, and peppers, which together occupied less than 30% of growing space, but generated 60 to 70% of total harvest value. These aren't outliers or theoretical scenarios. They reflect what actually happens when people focus growing space on high-efficiency crops. Understanding this data doesn't mean abandoning everything else you can grow. It means making intentional choices. If your goal is maximum financial return from limited space, these 7 categories deserve priority. A quarter of your garden focused on microgreens, lettuce, herbs, and peppers generates more value than 3/4 devoted to low-yield crops. If your goal is food security, diversity, and self-sufficiency, these crops integrate well into a broader system. Beans improve soil. Leafy greens provide consistent nutrition. Herbs add flavor and medicinal value beyond their market price. If you're a beginner, starting with these 7 removes guesswork. They're forgiving. They mature quickly. You'll see results, which builds both skill and confidence. If you're a market gardener or someone seeking supplemental income, these crops are where your competitive advantage lies. You can produce them consistently, in volume, at quality levels that justify retail pricing. The people and organizations promoting this information are straightforward. Agricultural Extension Services, university research departments, experienced growers, and market gardeners. They benefit from accuracy because their livelihoods depend on results. The people who don't prioritize this information are equally clear. Seed companies who profit from diverse, often low-efficiency purchases, garden centers who benefit from impulse buying, and agricultural inputs companies whose margins improve with higher input requirements. This isn't conspiracy, it's simple market incentives. A company selling seeds benefits from you planting 50 different varieties, not from you intensively growing 5 high-yield crops. A garden center makes more money on multiple small purchases than on one focused growing plan. That doesn't make their products or information bad. It just means that efficiency, which requires narrowing focus, doesn't serve their business model. Understanding that distinction is useful. What all of this comes down to is something straightforward. The most valuable use of growing space follows from basic biology and economics. Plants that mature quickly, occupy minimal space relative to their yield, and command high market or consumption value will always outperform plants with opposite characteristics. This won't change because it reflects physical reality, not opinion or preference. A microgreens tray will always produce more value per square foot than a sprawling squash plant. A basil plant will always cost less to maintain than a tomato and will generate comparable food value in less space and time. The challenge isn't understanding this. It's acting on it when most gardening culture emphasizes diversity, novelty, and growing everything. If you're growing food at home, you probably have finite space. That space has opportunity cost. It can produce either high-value or low-value crops. The choice is genuinely yours. Some people prioritize that math closely, others don't. But if you haven't looked at the actual numbers, now you know where to start. Grow what you want, but grow it knowing the trade-offs. The data is available. The crop varieties are accessible. The techniques are straightforward. What you do with that information depends on what you actually want from your garden. If that kind of practical analysis interests you, subscribe. We'll keep publishing information based on what works, not on what's trendy or what's being sold. The rest is up to you.